Alright, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for another one of Mac's rambles about something that most people probably don't care about. And today, I wanted to talk about Funko Pops. Got a Chase Bender Funko Specialty Series Glow Chase Limited Edition Bender burping, drinking a beer. So, Funko Pops, are they that bad? What's up? It's funny because I got inspired to make this video because I just saw a thumbnail on YouTube about, the worst things ever made. And the thumbnail had a Funko Pop. And I kind of just wanted to talk about, Funkos. So full disclosure, I'm a huge nerd. And during the pandemic, right before the pandemic, I went to Japan. And I saved up a ton of money because I expected to go crazy and buy a bunch of junk there. And I did buy some stuff, but it was right before the pandemic and our flight got canceled while we were there. And so we left kind of worried. So I didn't spend all that money, or not as much of the money as I expected to spend. So I came back middle of the pandemic, or not the middle, it was really the beginning. But I came back and everything was locked down. Everybody was at home. Most people were at home for a couple months. That spring and summer. So I remember everybody was just cooped up getting into different hobbies. I was playing a lot of Animal Crossing. But for me, one of the things I fell into, because I've always liked toys and I've always liked collecting stuff, is I got into Funko Pops. Feel free to roast me, make fun of me. You can, this is not some dark secret. I have shared pictures of my Funko collection with people in the past. It's whatever, they're vinyl toys. And so I think, to talk about Funko Pops, you have to understand the history of toys a little bit, and vinyl toys and collector toys, and how we arrived here. Because right now we're kind of in this Labubu craze, which is these blind box kind of furry toys. They're not furry like furries, but you know what I mean? They're fuzzy, like they're flocked or not flocked or whatever. They have fur. So those are very popular, partially because they're blind box. But yeah, so I think the major criticism about Funko Pops is that they are pretty generic looking, specifically for like human characters. Like if you look at like a Funko Pop of Hawkeye, you wouldn't be able to tell it's Hawkeye if he wasn't holding like a bow, right? And there's plenty of Funkos for like Friends or like Big Bang Theory, or where the characters are just people, and so if they're not in the box, you don't know who they are. And a lot of Funko people keep their toys, their figure, in the box, and the box is often considered part of the collectible, even though these boxes are the flimsiest, crappiest boxes in the world, notorious for damaging very easily, which is funny because even though they're crappy boxes, even fake ones have even crappier boxes. So, and yes, there are fake Funkos, that's how deep it goes. But to understand the style of Funko, I think we need to talk about two things. The first thing I would say is you need to be more familiar with what's called super deformed, or SD. In Japanese, it's called chibi style, which means like little, like kind of. And so if you're familiar with anime, chibi style is when they draw the characters with very small bodies, maybe bigger heads, and they're just a cutesy version with big eyes, exaggerated features. And I do think Funko Pops are heavily inspired by the chibi style. They have the big heads. They're more stylized, and that means there's a lack of detail in the face. So I think chibi or super deformed characters in Japanese, they don't sacrifice a lot of the character or the emotionality, but when you look at a Funko Pop, they just have these kind of black eyes that a lot of people see as soulless and emotionless, and very, I guess, corporate, because you can reuse a lot of these molds, and that's a big thing in toy making, is reusing molds. And so yeah, so going back, in the other side of that, I would say is to understand Funko as a company. They've always been this very retro company, leading into that 50s, 60s kind of retro art deco style, very much reminiscent of like the Fallout games, the Pip Boy, and those those characters. I'm not sure if the character is called Pip Boy, but you know what I mean. That kind of kitschy old, almost like 100 years ago art, I guess 75 years ago, you know what I mean, of just like character art you would see on advertisements and mascots, which were like cereal mascots and stuff like that, were getting really big at that time. So I think Funko leans into that heavily. They have their own character called Freddy Funko, which is very much, he's got that kind of old school, looks like a kid from the 50s with a striped shirt, and he's wearing like a crown. And so it's just very, I think Art Deco is the right word. But so you would see that, I think that influence combined with the chibi style. So if you look at some of the other Funko products they make, they have vinyl toys of like little guys that come in soda cans, and those characters are designed after Hanna-Barbera style, kind of like Flintstones, like head shaped and character shaped. And so I think those have a lot more character to them. They feel more fleshed out, realized as a concept. And I think that's something Funko has gotten better at. Unfortunately, just not with their mainline stuff, which is that Funko Pop has been so big for so long. And it got really big during the pandemic, and then immediately after that crashed down. And, you know, there's... I got out of Funko collecting. I got rid of most of mine. I think this one is one my dad got, and ironically my dad is more into it than me now. I sold a lot of my Funkos before going on my last Japan trip, which I did, you know, I'm not sure if I like broke even or made money, but some of the ones that I bought were a lot of money, and ended up appreciating because Funko people are crazy. So if you're not aware, you might be aware through other things like Beanie Babies or Labubus or things like that have come in and out of popularity. I think Funkos have had a weird amount of staying power. They've been around for a long time, and that design has kind of stayed consistent. They've gotten better at making some of this stuff, but I also think in a lot of ways they also cheap out on stuff. Funko is not well known. Like I said, with their boxes, they're kind of cheap. They cheap out on certain things, and I think... like sometimes I'd get like a glow-in-the-dark one or a blacklight one, and you could tell the plastic for the head was a different plastic for the body. And, you know, those kind of things don't matter to somebody who walks into a store and buys it off the shelf. But if you're buying these things online, you're an enthusiast, you're pre-ordering them, you're getting them directly from Funko's website, you do care about those things. So to go a little bit further back, the reason why I think Funkos are popular is because vinyl toys in the past have been actually kind of expensive, and they're hard to get into. Vinyl toys in the 90s and the early 2000s, it was kind of reserved for things that were more niche, like Godzilla toys, which I think to this day are probably some of the most popular soft vinyl toys. And you even see Funko has made their own like kind of Japanese style kaiju, like a lot of people who are, or Super 7 is another very popular toy maker, that they're all very inspired by that era of early soft toys being made in the 90s and early 2000s. So I was growing up in that era. I saw a lot of those toys like at places, but it wasn't accessible, I think, for the most people to get them. They could be expensive. And then starting in the 2000s, you started to get more designer toys, and the vinyls became this kind of status symbol, kind of like Bape was counterculture for Japanese culture in the shoe world. And they started to get those cube bricks, which were the bear bricks and stuff, and like, you know what I mean, there was just this explosion of toy art. And so people started seeing, you know, I could have a piece made by my famous artist that I bought as a toy, and I can display it, and other people who like toys and understand what the significance of these things are. So, you know what I mean? There's a lot of artists that, I forget the name of it, but he does a lot of I'll try to find it, of like, if you just Google like Ronald McDonald skeleton art, like, you know what I mean? There's people who have been making sculptures and these kind of iconic characters like SpongeBob and Mickey, and characters that are very heavily locked down for their IP, but they're able to skirt that by making them these art pieces and then making them into vinyl toys that are sold at limited batches. You know what I mean? So you can't just walk into a store and just buy this, but that's because they don't really have the license to make some of that stuff. Eventually, once those toys and art pieces are seen as more popular, they can acquire those licenses, but for the most part, McDonald's doesn't want a fat Buddha-like Ronald McDonald that you can see a skeleton and a toothy grin with like rotten teeth. You know what I mean? So if you know the artist, you'll know what I'm talking about. But there's like a lot of that in the fashion world, and that has bled into the toy world, where for a while there, vinyl toys became kind of this collector thing. It was only for people who not just had money but had good taste, right? And so you were looking for these toys you could put on your shelves, and they would reflect who you are, the interests you had, the artists you like. And then that extended even further out, and now we have this modern explosion of people in this day and age making their own toys, retro styled. And you know, I think you look at what's going on with Marvel Legends and a lot of these more popular toy lines, they have these retro packaging going back to the 80s and 90s, because there's people like me in my 30s and older, 40s, and now we're going to be looking at even forward. The nostalgia curve just keeps going, right? So, and the next up will be early 2000s nostalgia toys. So they're just emulating that packaging, and I think a lot of that is inspired by the indie toy scene, which is made by artists who love toys, grew up with toys, and make their own toys now and design not just the toy but the package, and it's this whole complete art piece as a whole. So we're now in this era of modern toys that feel like retro toys, and so toys are keeping this culture alive, but it's a lot of the time these are toys for adults, made by adults, and they're not always meant to be played with. They're usually meant to be kept in the package, and they're meant to be displayed, right? And so getting back to Funkos, and what all of this context means is Funkos are, or were, as far as I know, when I started getting into them in the 2020s, they were cheap, they were affordable, they were inexpensive. And what I mean is you could get, for $100, you might be able to get one designer vinyl toy. You might be able to get one super rare translucent Godzilla. Now it's, not that crazy, but some of these things are rarer than others. You can get affordable Ultraman and Godzilla and kaiju toys now. It's not crazy like it used to be. It used to be import items and stuff. But to get into these Funkos were very, like, they started out cheap. Obviously now people see them as these collectibles, and their prices can go crazy for older or rarer ones, or ones that didn't have a lot of printing. But the idea was you could walk into a store, you could find the character that you liked, and you can walk out and you have spent $8, $9, $10, and that might sound like a lot, but go into a store right now and look at a Marvel Legends. It is $25 for a normal 6-inch, just like a Spider-Man, Iron Man. It's like $25. You know what I mean? You can get them on sale, but that's the sticker price. As of 2025, a good action figure is that much. Usually, if you're looking at the smaller range, like a 4-inch figure, you can get them down to $10 or $15, but they're not going to be very articulated. They're very basic. They won't have a lot of accessories, you know what I mean? And yeah, so it's just interesting because I grew up in the era in the 90s with, you had Spider-Man and Batman toys, and it was like an explosion. And I still remember, there was all the He-Man and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle toys still residually hanging around, and Thundercats and all these different toys. They were just everywhere, and there was 100 different Batman in all different colors, and there was 100 different Spider-Man in all different colors, and like they all had different accessories and play features and stuff. And now toys are very simple. Toys that are meant for kids are very simple, and so you have this kind of stratification of the industry of, you have cheaper stuff that's meant for kids and more designer or like collector stuff that's meant for adults. And it's just really a weird time to be into toys. And I think Funko is a good doorway. Like I said, it's cheap, and they have characters that typically you don't see. You can't walk into, most stores and get a Futurama toy. Some of the other Funkos I have like a Dexter's Laboratory, a Johnny Bravo, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Invader Zim, I've got Fooly Cooley. Again, a Fooly Cooley figure, if I want a figure of Conti from FLCL, it's like $80, $50. Maybe I might be able to get a statue a little cheaper, but it's $50 to $80 to $100. And they're nice toys. They're great toys. They have a ton of accessories. They're worth the money, but not everybody has that kind of money. So if you can walk into a Newbury Comics or Spencer's Gifts or a Hot Topic and you say, hey, I like Invader Zim, and they're like, oh, cool, check it out. Here's a $10. Now, obviously, I think Funkos are like $15 now, which is crazy. But again, with all of these things, you can get them in deals, buy 2, get 1 free, or buy 3, or whatever the deal is. And that is how I got into it in the pandemic. They were very cheap going into the pandemic. They had a ton of stuff that just wasn't selling, and I just like scooped up a bunch. And that's the danger with Funkos, is you just collect everything that you like, and if you like a lot of stuff, then there's an unlimited amount. And then eventually, as I collected more, I realized I need to focus up and just focus on the things I really like. And that's how I ended up with a ton of Marvel ones and a ton of Spider-Man. I had like 50 different Spider-Mans, and I love Spider-Man. And that's the thing is, they made Spider-Man Funkos of characters I never thought I'd see, and that's cool. You know what I mean? Is lesser known characters getting their due, and Funko does that. They, you for $10 you can get a Nightwing. Nightwing, is not as popular as a Batman, but you could walk in and maybe grab one. That's what I mean, is these side characters that don't get an action figure. Funko still gets you a toy you can put on your desk. Someone walks up and says, wow, I love, R5 or whatever it is, some random droid, not that, Star Wars, they've made every possible toy. Some of these things that they do have toys of, like Marvel Legends, they've made so many different Marvel Legends, but again, it's $25 for one figure. If your favorite character is a Hulk or a bigger guy, forget it. You know what I mean? It's going to be even more expensive. Now that they have Marvel Legends, like the maximum Spider-Man is $50. It's still just a 6-inch figure with just a ton of accessories. I just think toys are outrageous, and I was starting to get onto the point of, so Funkos are a good, get a first toy in the door as for a new toy collector, because they're simple. You know what you're getting. It's cheap. Some people don't care about the cheap boxes. They take them out, throw them away, because they just want the toy. And not all these people are collectors. They just like the thing, you know what I mean? And there's something to be said for having a cheap merch option to just walk into a store, buy it, and go boink. And then, for kids, it's a cheap gift. Some adults are really into them. I know people who I work with who have them on their desk, and they're totally normal human beings that just like Friends or whatever sitcom, Seinfeld, and they wanted a Kramer Funko, whatever. So who gives a shit? I think, a lot of the people who talk the most about Funkos are just kind of snobs, when these are it's a class thing, right? You know what I mean? So if you were aware of the history of vinyl toys, and that there were these like very fancy designer toys that are $100 and hundreds and thousands of dollars, and they still exist. You can go on StockX right now and look at the toys that are on there, and there's crazy collectibles. So it's a class thing to me, is that there's a cheap option that anyone can get into collecting, and then for $100 you can walk out with an arm full of these. Before the pandemic, they were cheaper. There's some that were $7, $8, $9, $10, so you could walk out of a store with more than 10 Funkos and just have a collection going already for $100. Whereas for $100 for most collector toys, if you like, I love Spider-Man, and all of the best Spider-Man figures are bare minimum like $80 to $100. Mafex, Spider-Man, they're amazing figures. You can put them into pretzel-like different forms, but not everyone has $80. Some people just want, the hoodie Spider-Man, and they don't want to break the bank to get, Ben Reilly Spider-Man or whatever. So that's kind of where I come at it. And also Funko is a good foot in the door to teaching you different. So like this is a chase, right? So that means, if you're familiar with toys, back in the day, they started doing chases as an incentive to get people out to look for rare versions of the toys. Like in a box, they might randomly put in, they call it short packing, just putting one rare version of a toy. Say like Invisible Woman, most of the toys are just her regular, right? And then there's a random version of her where she's completely translucent. Of course, everybody's going to want that rare version, right? And so Funko knew that, and when they started doing their Funko Pops, they introduced chases, and not every character has a chase, but some of them have alternate versions that you can seek out, and then for collectors it's another level of rarity. And that's a big thing in toys, chases and like Build-A-Figures, and like they have all these different methods to get people to buy more toys, and that's what led us to blind boxes, which now blind boxes are a huge industry, and that's what led to stuff like Pop Mart and Labubu. And so, and again, Pop Mart, again, if you look at the history of Pop Mart, it's the same stuff. It's vinyl toys, designer toys. They're designed by artists. And so, again, you know, people crap on Funkos, but they still hire artists to make the sculpts and stuff for all these vinyl toys. And, you know, I think it's very easy to sit back as somebody who's not into toys or not into pop culture stuff and look at a Funko and be like, that thing's stupid, that thing's ugly, I don't like it. And it's like, yeah, good. It's not for you then. You know what I mean? Because it was never going to be for you. It's for somebody who wanted that character. It's not for somebody who's going to sit there and look at it as this beautiful art piece. It's, to me, it's an entryway into toys as a concept, as an industry, as a way of expressing yourself. Like right now, you can't see it, but I've got a whole shelf of like different toys up there, and some of them are Funko, not Funko Pops, but a lot of them are like the Funko Sodas I was talking about, the little Hanna-Barbera style ones. I think it's not just that they're collectible, it's that they've got great packaging, they have good style. I know people think, oh, Funkos, you can't even tell what character that is, but again, it works very well for a character. Like, look at this Bender. Everyone knows what Bender looks like. So a super deformed, chibi, you know, tiny body, big head Bender, everyone still knows what that character is. So, you know what I mean? If you want a Bender burping fire on your desk, Funko's got you covered. And so I just think, you know, to me, again, I know it sounds stupid, but it's like a class thing. And I think a lot of the people who are speaking on this don't understand the history of toys. They don't understand how we got here, you know what I mean, in 2025 with vinyl toys, how we got here with blind boxes and everything. The industry has come so far in that, I don't know, that Funko was always going to happen. It was an inevitability. It was an answer to, oh, how do I get my favorite character as a soft vinyl toy at a cheap, affordable price that I can stick on my desk and everyone walks by, and now it's a conversation starter. They know exactly what characters I like. They know what I'm into. There's no questions. You know what I mean? And yeah, that's it. Yeah, is it excessive that people have entire rooms dedicated to them like a shrine? Absolutely. But is it any worse than buying a bunch of hot toys? And if you don't know what those are at least bare minimum $100, like super, I wouldn't even call them action figures. They're like G.I. Joe sized doll, basically. They're super detailed, down to like every likeness of the actor is like perfectly replicated sometimes. But for how expensive these things are, if you buy 10 of those, you will need like to take out a mortgage on your house or a house loan, you know what I mean? So to get into hot toys it's a rich people thing. You just literally can't do it unless you just don't have exorbitant amount of money. And so toy collecting became very expensive, very niche. It became I don't know, I can't describe it any other way than a class thing. Is that obviously the more money you have, the cooler collection you're gonna have. And so people who walk by and say, they look at a Funko Pop wall in someone's house, they go, that looks ugly, they look cheap. Yeah, they are cheap. That was the point. That guy didn't have a lot of money, and he still managed to get a collection that means a lot to him, of characters that mean a lot to him, that express who he is or who they are or whatever it is. You know what I mean? And so that's how I felt at the time, is like, I love Spider-Man. I'm just going to have every Spider-Man. But it does get to a point where you have to question your sanity of like, okay, when does it stop? And so that's how they get you and then, you know, if you're putting stuff into storage or you have so many you can't even display them all, then you've hit too many and you need to reevaluate. So obviously with anything, I think less is more. And the pieces that you do choose to show, for me now, I'm focusing more on things from my actual childhood and, you know, either reproductions of those toys or just actually going and finding those toys myself. And part of the fun is finding them, the story behind finding them. And so, yeah, toy collecting is a great hobby. I don't think there's anything wrong with if you want to collect Funkos or you want to collect those super expensive toys or you want to collect designer soft vinyl toys or you want to collect Labubus. Just fucking do it and don't worry so much. I guess, you know, there's going to be always people who poo-poo whatever is the most popular thing, and they're just not going to understand it. There's people who shit on Taylor Swift because she's Taylor Swift without listening to, you know, the context of her lyrics or whatever it is. There's always going to be people who just take the surface level and they run with that, and it's like that. It says more about those people than those who choose to look a little bit deeper, who choose to not go with the overarching thought that everything is already been determined by some unseen panel of judges, that of what is cool and what isn't, and what's art and what isn't. And you know what I mean? Just fucking enjoy the things you like the characters you like, love the things you like, collect the things you like, and don't worry so much about these fucking assholes who are like, Funko ugly, I don't know who collect them. It's like, man, dude, it's not for you. What the fuck ever, man. You don't see so many people like talking shit on Labubus right now, and if they are, I'm not seeing it because everyone seems to be loving them, and it's just like, go for it, man. It's just the latest thing that lets people understand themselves better through the things that they choose to collect, and then they connect with other people through those things, and it's awesome, and the communities are formed, and it's just a good thing. So many people just are so negative, and I think that's really what it all comes back down to: negativity. Let people be positive and enjoy the things they like, and not just immediately go for the easy, like, man, Funko, whew, it's like, man, it has been, I don't know, 10, 15 years, and I still hear the same criticisms of them. It's like, get a new bit, okay? Go make fun of the very expensive $1,000 vinyl collector toys for rich people for a little bit, and then come back to the Funkos after you've gone and done some research. Anyway, I'm gonna end it there. Sorry, I just rambled about toys for however long, but you can tell I feel passionate about it. All right, bye. Funko Pops out.